Hello everybody, my name is Jacob Kahn and I'm the team lead for my team. Next to me I have Barbara Makapati, who is our Scrum Master, Vinicius Tavares, who did a lot of our front-end development, Patrick Jean-Baptiste, who did a lot of back-end development, and Joshua Carberry, who also worked on back-end. So our project was the user logging system and message center tool, and we developed this project for David Sylvia over at Newick. So right now I'm going to hand it over to Josh, who can give you a little bit of a background on the problem we're facing and the solutions we came up with.
Alright, so we developed our project for Newick's Undersea Warfare Rapid Innovation Center, or the USWRIC, also just known as the RIC. And this is Newick's makerspace over in Newport, Rhode Island. What that means is it's a facility where they invite any Newick employees to come, whether they're off hours or on a lunch break. They can come and play around with a host of technologies, spaces, and equipment made available to them to pursue passion projects and ask personal questions. The benefit of running a facility like this is that they get to ask questions that maybe they don't have time to ask at work and they don't have the equipment to ask at home. And innovations can come out of this that otherwise would never have seen the light of day. However, running a facility like this does have its costs, and those mostly come in the form of more difficult management. First and foremost, it's hard to know where everyone and everything is, to know who's using what at what times, who's coming into the building when, because of the freer nature of the facility. This makes sharing more difficult too. If the managers don't know what equipment's being used, the other users also don't know what equipment's being used. The question is, how do we create a system that tracks everything that's being used so that people can know when something's available, when it isn't, and etc. Finally, due to the more free hours of this facility, communication becomes difficult. In a traditional workplace, you can get everybody in one room, in a meeting, tell them what's going on, get feedback from your users, and also tell your users about what's happening in the facility. This is more challenging with a makerspace because there's no set schedule, so communication becomes difficult. The current solutions our client is using to these problems are all manual. And what I mean when I say that is that there's pen and paper sign-ins, pen and paper reservations, and actually to drive the displays around the RIC and to get messages to users, our client has been burning slideshows, images, and videos onto DVDs, which he has to then play on the displays, which obviously represents a big unnecessary overhead. And the whole system becomes decentralized as a result, just because everything's on pen and paper. It's not collected in a database where you can easily access and view all of it. So in terms of our solution, we wanted to create a system that was lightweight and intuitive, that wouldn't bog down the creative freedom in the facility, which is the beautiful thing about it. We wanted something that users could easily get used to and integrate into their workflow. And we wanted a list of key features to support for both users and administrators. For users, we wanted first and foremost logins, so that when they come in the door, there's some system that tracks a record that they've been there. We wanted reservations, so that they can more easily share 3D printers and breakout rooms, which are the various reservable spaces in the building, and so that managers can also look at that information and know what's in use when. Finally, we wanted a system in case someone wants to take something out of the building where that would be tracked, so some administrator-assisted equipment checkout. On the administrator side of things, we wanted account and data management so that administrators would be able to, say if someone got married and their last name changed, they could change the name of the associated account, or they could remove an account of a user who had not come for a very long time. We wanted also statistics. So one of the beauties of collecting all of this data is that now that it's all in front of us in a centralized system, we can maybe make some inferences over it. For example, what piece of equipment is most popular, what printer is going to need more maintenance than others, and etc. Finally, we wanted to address that DVD player problem and provide our client with some easier means of driving the various displays throughout the buildings. The system we implemented all started out with a MySQL database at the very top, and this contains everything associated with the project. So user accounts, administrator accounts, reservations, the reservable items, all the equipment. Everything is stored in the database. This database is accessed and modified by our Java backend server, which receives and fulfills requests from two clients. Our first client is the Android client, which is run on a tablet, and it's for users, so it's not password protected or anything of that sort. Our second client is the Windows 10 client, which is password protected to be used by administrators. Finally, the backend server also communicates with a Raspberry Pi, which is our means of driving the displays in the facility. In terms of the features we ended up implementing, for the users, we did end up implementing that login feature. So there will be a tablet at the front of the facility when users come in. If their account has not yet been created, they can easily enter their name and Newick badge ID. No password required, in the interest of keeping this as lightweight and easy to use as possible. And once their account's created, they can just easily go in, tap their name, be signed in the facility, get on with whatever they want to do. Reservations. So there's going to be another tablet up near the 3D printers in the facility where users can go and they can put in the name of their print or the name of their event, the duration, things of that nature, and they can reserve the various spaces and 3D printers in the facility. There's also a means for equipment checkout. So with the help of an administrator, users can get a piece of equipment that maybe they want to take home for a few days, and they can check that out, such that it is tracked in the system, and administrators can see who it's signed out to, etc. On the administrator side of things, like I said, that account management, so there's means of editing usernames, administrator passwords, stuff like that. Statistics. This is another key feature of the Windows 10 application. So the administrators actually have the power to use what's in the database to help them run the facility a little bit better. They can see what equipment's checked out, they can see which printers are seeing the most use, and other statistical inferences that help them know what their users want without having to get them all in that meeting, like I said. Finally, there's display management. And that's our means of driving all the televisions in the RIC, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that now. So, due to the specific security and just the constraints of the facility itself, the TVs that they have, we had to get a little bit creative with how we addressed this part of the project. And what we came up with was to use a Raspberry Pi as a multimedia center to drive the TVs directly. So each TV will have its own Raspberry Pi, which will be connected over HDMI, and powered right through micro USB through that TV itself. This creates a self-contained system that runs no additional wires across the floor and is a little bit more convenient for driving displays. What happens is, from our Windows 10 application, administrators can enter messages which are automatically converted into a PDF format and pushed over onto the Raspberry Pi, which will then automatically play a slideshow of those messages. And another advantage of using Pis for this is that in the future, let's say our client wants to put a browser or some other application that can run on Linux onto the screens, he can do that, because Raspberry Pis obviously are a Linux-based system. So in terms of the technologies used, our three languages were Java, which we use to create the backend server, XML, which we use for the Android client's UI, C#, which we use for the Windows 10 application. Our frameworks were MySQL for the database, Spring Boot, which was our Java backend server's framework, Hibernate was our object relational manager, and the Android framework, which we use for the framework of our Android application. And we developed that application on Android Studio. Our other two IDEs were Eclipse and IntelliJ. And for source control, we use GitHub. For communication, we use Slack. And for task management, we used UTrack. So I'm going to pass it over on to Jacob and Vinny now for the demonstration.
All right, thank you, Josh. So we're just getting the tablet right now displayed onto the screen. So, when you first open up the administrative application, the Android application, as Josh stated earlier, there's going to be two tablets scattered throughout the rig. One is going to be at the front door, which is going to be used for user login, and the other one's going to be used where the 3D printers are, and that's going to be used for reserving 3D printers as well as breakout rooms. So when we were designing this application, we didn't want either of the tablets to be pigeonholed into one specific task. We wanted the administrators to be able to use any of the tablets for any of the functionality. So the administrator gets to choose which functionality this tablet is going to be used for. So to start off this demonstration, we're going to pretend that the tablet that Vinny's holding here is used for user login. So this is going to be the tablet that would be at the front door of the rig, and it's what users are going to first encounter when they enter into the room. So we're going to pretend that Vinny is a user for the first time, and what we need to do is just get some basic information about him. His name, his ID, which department he belongs to, and we're going to use that information further on in the application to develop statistics, figure out who is where, when they're there, how often they're using the room, and administrators can kind of tailor room activities to be used for the actual users depending on who is there. So when Vinny hits the application, he hits submit, it should go through. So when that happens is it will automatically check to make sure that a user doesn't already exist with the application. So now that Vinny enters in his information correctly, assuming that he doesn't have screen freeze. All right, here we go. Sorry about that. So once Vinny is in the system, he will be welcomed in, and Amelia is giving us all sorts of issues today. So we are now going to. Now, if Vinny is a user who has entered the room, already entered his information, all he has to do is click Save Users, find his name in the list, click his name, and all it will do is just log his entrance into the room at that time. So like we said earlier, it's a very lightweight, very simple to use application, which is exactly what we want to be for the RIC, as we want the users to be able to use the RIC for its main purpose. So moving on the application, we're going to now go to making a reservation. So there's two types of reservations that can be made, as stated earlier, and that's a printer reservation as well as a breakout room reservation. So making a reservation for either of these is very similar. There's just a few differences in the actual data that's going to be stored for them. So for the purpose of this demonstration, we're going to show how to make a breakout room reservation. So the first thing you're going to display with is a calendar for the month. And what you can do is go and click on that day of the month that you might be having your event in a breakout room, enters in some basic details about yourself, what your event is, what rooms you want to be reserving, who you are, so we can get an idea of who's actually creating this event, what time the event is going to be held at, and once that information is entered in correctly, it'll go and actually save that into the database. Now, I mentioned earlier that there were some differences between the breakout events and a printer reservation. The only difference is that here we actually save the rooms with a start time and an end time. For 3D printers, however, we actually use a duration for the prints. Some of these 3D prints can be 100 hours, 200 hours, sometimes over 300 hours, so predicting the end times can be very difficult for users, so we just have the system predict that for themselves, and they give the duration of what they're estimating the print to be. So that's pretty much it for reserving a room. We don't really have to show you printer reservation, as it's a very similar process. We're going to slide on down to equipment checkout, which all of these functionalities are password protected, so Vinny's just going to have to enter in his administrator credentials, just so we can get to the next screen, as all equipment must be checked out with the help of an administrator. So once he submits that, we're going to pretend he's adding a new piece of equipment here. Was not refreshing again, I apologize. So here's what the screen looks like now. So Vinny's just going to go and enter in. Oh, all right, well, we just figured out a new piece then. So Vinny's going to enter in some information about himself, the equipment that he's registering. There's some additional fields such as the manufacturer name, the model number of the equipment, the serial number. Those are all optional. We really only care about that product name as well as the bits number, which can be equated to a barcode number for you guys. So the emulator was working for you guys. I do apologize for this. It would show that the screen was added successfully. And then now what that means is that the equipment is logged in the database. So every time the user wants to go and use this piece of equipment, all they have to do is find an administrator. The administrator has to log in with their credentials, and then all that they have to do after that is just add in that barcode number as well as the user badge, and it will log that registration to their name. So it's a very simple process to do. We really want to keep it very simple for the users. We don't want to have too much overhead on the actual tablet itself. So Vinny's going to demonstrate here entering in the barcode number, which we would have to have you enter in for checking a piece of equipment out. We can also scan it, as you guys can see right there, just to make it a little bit simpler. As everything is barcoded, the administrator has the choice to either scan it or enter it in manually if they would like to. So that pretty much concludes our demonstration for the Android tablet. But as Josh stated earlier, we have a Windows client as well. And this client is going to be solely used for administrator functionality. So everything that is going to be accessed through this Android client will be, Windows client will have to be password protected. So Vinny's just going to enter in his administrator credentials once again, submit that to the system, and here's the main screen that you're faced with when you enter into the administrator application. So these right here are the four main functionalities of what an administrator will be doing. You have your statistics. We want to have user-generated statistics from the room. So Vinny's just going to demonstrate, what would happen if maybe you wanted to search by a user. You can either search the user by their ID or their specific name, and we just give you specific information like whose the name is, how many times they've entered into a RIC, when was the last time they were here, how long have they been a RIC user for, what department they're from, just so the administrator can kind of get an idea of who's using the room, where they're from, and how often they're using the room. So the other statistics button will have very similar functionalities. Next we have display management. I'm going to skip over that for now. We're going to come back to that later. And so we're going to go right on to user and admin management, which is pretty self-explanatory. You have your ability to remove administrators, add new administrators if you want to add somebody else onto the team. You can add a new user, assuming somebody hasn't been in the room for a long time or they're not even an employee at Newick anymore. You can access all of that through this page right here. Finally, we have the personal information page, and what this essentially will be is you can just change your name, change your your badge ID, you can change your password if need be. All of your personal details are going to be contained in this page right here. Now, what we really want to show you guys is our display management page. And like Josh said, earlier they were using slideshows burning off DVDs. It was a very tedious process, very difficult to do. So we want to give a very easy way to make that process go along much smoother. So Vinny's just going to enter in administrative messages, say, hey, there's a team meeting today at 3 o'clock. We want that message to display for however many days he enters in the duration that is located in days. That message will successfully go into the database. And what that does now is as soon as that message enters into the database, it automatically generates an image based on the message that we just entered in. And what that does is now, if we switch over to the Pi, all right, we're having all sorts of technical difficulties today. So what you would see with the Raspberry Pi is essentially 3 screens. Unfortunately, the Pi is not cooperating with our HDMI cable for some reason. But what you would actually see is the Raspberry Pi would have 3 different screens. The first screen is important information about the administrative, messages. So say, the RIC is closing early today, they want to get all equipment back for some specific reason. Administrator can choose which message they want to put onto the screen, and it will automatically display for them. The second screen we would actually have up there is for future events. So, say you're going to have some large, team bonding activity that's going to be happening in the RIC in a week. The administrator could actually go in and enter that activity into the UI that we showed you earlier. And what that would do is would automatically generate an image and say, hey, there's going to be this team bonding activity in the RIC from this date until this date. Try and stop by if you can. And then, people can see that as they're going through the RIC, and it just makes it very simple for them to get the information. And then finally, what we have is an actual breakout room event. So say that there's, as I mentioned earlier, you can reserve a breakout room. And so what we actually do is just take all the events from today, say here's the events that are happening in the RIC, display that on the screen as well. That's automatically generated by our servers. So the goal of this Raspberry Pi was really to just make everything very, very simple. We don't want to have the administrator be burning DVDs with PowerPoints over and over and over again. It should just be one click and just have all the functionality that they want. So that concludes our demonstration. I'm now going to open it up to questions.